Kevin is going to give us a 5-minute primer on the election code, which will take some doing. So thank you.
David? Yeah, thank you, David. Thank you, Jared. I'm going to try to do it in 5 minutes. Never tried to do the whole election code before in 5 minutes, and that's what this is. This is just election law, just the election code. And it's not all of it. Because election law, as we deal with it here, some of it comes from the US Constitution, some of it comes from the Pennsylvania Constitution, some of it comes from federal statutes. Things we think of like the Voting Rights Act, the Help America Votes Act, but also things like the Americans with Disabilities Act. So there's a whole myriad of federal laws that drive how we run these elections that are in here. We also have the Ethics Act for Pennsylvania, the Right to Know law. There's a bunch of other laws that come into play. And then, frankly, much of election law is judge-made law. But what we have here is the election code, and it talks about everything from how we set up divisions and how many people can live in one, how we do campaign finance, how we pick election board members, how we pick committee people, how we pick elected officials, how you challenge them, how you get them on the ballot, how you challenge them getting on the ballot, what happens when one of them gets sick, what happens when one of them dies, what happens if somebody puts an illegal ad out, what happens if they don't put the disclaimer at the bottom that says paid for by. It requires you to say paid for by. There's a whole myriad of issues here, and I can't cover them all, even if all I was doing was running through them in 5 minutes. The other thing I want to say is David stole my thunder a little bit. I had two things I wanted to say, one of which was a baseball analogy, that this is about the fact that we have human beings like those judges of elections who have to call balls and strikes. That this is about giving them rules to follow, because they have human biases. We appreciate your service, I really do, but they're human beings. So we give them detailed rules to follow, and that way they can be fair. The second part he said was that this election code is now 81 years old. It has only really been changed three times really. The first one was actually in 1978 in response to some of the problems with Watergate. They updated some of the ethics and compliance provisions and how much money you could do in certain ways. They put a ban on getting cash over $100, whatever. And then with federal changes, in the Help America Vote Act when we got machines, and the Motor Voter Law, the National Voter Registration Act, when we got folks who it changed the way we did registrations, there were some revisions. But the rest of these books are largely unchanged from 81 years ago. And much of the law goes back even further. I'm going to read you just my favorite section of election law. I'm not going to read you the whole thing, I'm going to tell you what it is. It is section 2095. Section 2095 requires, only in Philadelphia, the city commissioners, so Lisa Dealey, to maintain a fireproof room or vault in a public building of the city where the judges of elections on election night can bring their returns and place them in the hands of the mayor and the mayor alone, and the mayor alone must guard them in the fireproof vault until they are counted when you get time to count them. That's section 2095. Section 2096 is even better, because if the mayor doesn't do that, he's subject to 3 years in jail. And that law goes back to the 1840s, because there was apparently a controversy where somebody tried to steal an election in 1848 by burning ballots. So they passed a law to deal with it, and it's still on the books. It's not enforced, thank God, but it's still on the books. And so that's there. So as I've talked about some of the stuff that's there, and the other thing I want to talk about is how, and I hate to say this about a guy who's my friend and my client, it sounds a little patronizing, but it's incredibly brave what Jared's doing. In Harrisburg, in the legislature, folks are terrified to take on the election code in anything but micro tiny ways, because everybody's afraid of a couple things. One, incumbents don't like things that might disrupt the status quo. Two, everybody's afraid of unintended consequences. We're going to hear a lot of good ideas tonight, and I agree with almost everything most of the folks to my left are going to talk about. But no offense, but the open primary one's a horrible idea for what it does to the First Amendment. That's my belief. But that's an unintended consequences from a goal that is very laudable about bringing up participation and getting in there. But the point is, unintended consequences freak everybody out in Harrisburg. And reformers, like all of us up here, we're also terrified that if somebody goes ahead and tries to rewrite the whole election code, some nefarious leadership person in Harrisburg is going to slip a lot of stuff in there that's problematic, and we won't know about it until after it's law. And so as a result, every time anybody's tried to fix the election code, it's like the third rail, it's like Social Security in terms of federal politics. It just doesn't get done. But we have needs. For example, right now, if you want to run as a third-party candidate for office in Pennsylvania, this book says you need to get a whole chunk of signatures in February. For 35 years, that's been wrong. The federal courts have said that was too early, it was wrong. They had to get them by August 1st. Different numbers that were there. Then a few years ago, there was another lawsuit brought that said the number of votes they had was too high. This goes back to the Ralph Nader debacle, where to get the 67,000 votes, signatures they needed to get them on the ballot, they filed like 90,000 that were just horrible frauds. Well, the level was way too high, but the Nader people, rather than trying to hit it, just created fiction. Both are wrong. But now, if you were a member of the Libertarian Constitution and Green Party, you only need 5,000 signatures to run for governor, and you get to file them by August 1st. Now, if you're from any other party, that lawsuit doesn't apply to you. So those people have to get 80,000, 67,000 signatures by August 1st. But if you looked at the election code, the law of the Commonwealth, it tells you you need to get roughly 13,000 signatures back in February. And those 13,000 signatures, if you get them in February, they wouldn't count towards your 67, by the way, because they'd be at the wrong time of year. So that needs to be changed. It is a simple update to figure out how to let third-party candidates get on the ballot in a way that makes sense. Everybody's known to do this for 15 years, but they haven't done it. And that's there. Similar updates that we need to have, and I'll go quickly, for example, but we haven't changed the dollar amounts involved. So since 1978, you had to file a 24-hour report if you received $500. Well, in today's dollars, that's about $2,500. So that's a lot of money. But $500 in an election, you know, you're running for governor, getting $500 the last week of an election happens hundreds of times a day. Those reports get so voluminous that nobody can read them. It used to be that big donations should be called out so the press could talk about it. Instead, we have this inadvertent situation where so many donations are filed that are relatively small that nobody pays attention to those 24-hour reports anymore. Same thing goes for cash contributions. It used to be when they passed the list law after Watergate, they said anybody giving more than $100 in cash, you could not accept $100 in cash. You could accept $99.99 in cash, but not $100. $100 back then was like $500 today. Okay, that's probably the right threshold for corruption. But the idea that somebody who wants to participate in the process, but doesn't have a good checking account, like many, first-generation Americans, it's a problem now because they can't even give $100. And so we're talking about if we really believe speech is money, and that's what the Supreme Court tells us, then we're discriminating against people in a way that doesn't work. So those are somehow minor changes, and we're going to talk about structural ones throughout. I think every one I had listed as a structural idea that I wanted to encourage, Mike is going to talk about with one exception, so I'm just going to throw it out there. In addition to the ones you're going to hear about, I want you to think about one other one, which is moving election day. I know Brendan Boyle put a bill in to make it a holiday, which would be a good idea in its own right, but the other option is to put it on a Saturday. Think about how many more people could vote. If they did, there's a secretary in my office, not a law firm, a big firm, we'll accommodate her. But she normally leaves her house at 6:30 in the morning and gets back about 8:15 at night. She can't vote out in Chester County. She's got to go in and get an absentee ballot just because she's commuting to work in Center City. So we need to think about these things. Move, the early voting, the no-fault absentee. There's a lot of good fixes, but I think they're going to cover them. But a simple thing as moving election day to Saturday would be night and day. You have to deal with the fact, my people, there are some Orthodox Jews who would have an issue with that, so you accommodate them. But there's a way to deal with this, and we need to do these things. And all of these are good reforms, but we're going to hear about a lot of really interesting ideas. The most exciting thing about this is that Jared's being very brave leading this. The Committee of 70 has been out front for literally a century pushing for reform. Again, we don't agree on everything, but they've been pushing for reform. But now we've got these people that these folks represent. And Kathy's a government employee. But these folks over here represent a lot of people who are working really hard. Kathy to stop the Russians, and all these other people to fix it so that we can do a better job. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to them. But just thank you very much for coming out. It's really exciting to see you all.
Does anyone have a question for Kevin? We can take two, if you've got it.
Yes, just state your name.
Laura Axel.
Hey, Laura, go ahead. Hi.
Why do you not focus on the possibility of early voting instead of thinking Saturday, keep the change today, or keep the day?
The question was about why don't we have early voting in Pennsylvania?
The answer is I'm not saying that at all. It's just Micah's going to talk about that. It's a great idea, but Micah's going to talk about it. I didn't want to steal his thunder.
Question about the election code overview. Anybody? Gail?
Why Saturday? Why not Sunday? We also have Seventh-day Adventists.
Why Saturday for voting? Why not Sunday?
Simple answer is we might as well do both. We might as well do early voting for 2 weeks. No, but what I'm saying is Saturday or Sunday, that's just a question. I mean, I'll be honest, and I say this as a Jew, there are more of you than there are of me. There are more, not necessarily you, but more Protestants. No, but there's more Protestants than there are Jews. There are more Catholics than there are Jews. So I'm trying to accommodate people. The goal with this proposal, and it may not be the right one, I'd rather have early voting that goes on for 2 weeks or whatever else. But we can make changes to make it easier on everybody. It will always be hard on some people, but I'd rather that the people who have to have an accommodation are those who have made a choice of lifestyle as opposed to those who have economic circumstances that don't allow it. That's just my personal belief.